There was a well-meaning frog who used to stand by a river and lead other animals across the river without expecting anything in return. One day a scorpion came to him. He said, "Let me cross the river too." The frog said, "No, I can't trust you. You'll sting me halfway. You are bad-tempered." The scorpion said, "If I sting you, won't I drown with you? Why would I sting you?" The frog was convinced by the scorpion's words. Eventually, he said okay and took the scorpion on his back, and they started swimming into the river. Just as they reached the middle of the river, the frog felt a terrible pain in his back. He turned his head and looked at the scorpion and asked, "Why did you do this? Look, now we are both going to drown and die here." The scorpion looked at the frog and said, "It's just my nature." This story is an animal tale in the narrative genre known as animal tale or beast fable. An animal tale usually consists of a short story or poem. It contains an allegorical narrative and animals are made to speak. This narrative technique allows the message to be conveyed directly or indirectly to the audience in a highly effective way. Although they may seem simple in children's fairy tales, they actually derive their power from their simplicity and can be very effective for adults as well. Establishing a symbolic connection in order to provide a better understanding of an image, an experience, thought, concept, or a behavior, and transferring this connection in visual arts through sculpture or painting is called allegory. To give an example of allegory, let's take the statue of Themis, for example. Themis is the goddess of justice and order, the daughter of Uranus and Gaia from Greek mythology. It is an allegorical expression that the abstract concept of justice is depicted through a statue of a blindfolded goddess holding a scale. Allegorical expressions are powerful and effective. Therefore, it is also very effective in the story of the scorpion and the frog. Animal fables are typically transferred freely between languages and often take on pedagogical roles. Aesop, for example, was standard as basic textbook material in Europe. Aesop's fables are fables believed to have been told by the ancient Greek fabulist Aesop, who supposedly lived in the 6th century BC. In these tales, which have become the common property of human culture, animals, plants, or inanimate beings think and speak like humans, gods and humans come together, and the essence of the tales is the implicit criticism and objections of the masses of people to the rulers. The Jataka tales, which emerged in India in the 4th century BC, and the Panchatantra, which emerged between 300 BC and 100 BC, are similar to animal tales. The most famous successor is the La Fontaine tales. An example from recent history is the allegorical novel Animal Farm by George Orwell, one of the most important works of English literature. This type of fairy tales can easily spread from culture to culture as they are abstracted from the social context of human beings. For example, the fictional character known as Uncle Remus was the fictional protagonist and narrator of a collection of African-American fairy tales compiled and adapted by Chandler Harris and published in book form in 1881. The Uncle Remus stories introduced the character Brother Rabbit to American culture. Brother Rabbit was a trickster who succeeded more through his wit than brawn, antagonizing authority figures and bending social mores as he saw fit. In the 19th century, Chandler Harris and later the Walt Disney Company adapted it for the 1946 animated film Song of the South. First published in 1902, the Peter Rabbit books followed a variety of animal characters, each one aiming to teach children a specific moral. Bugs Bunny cartoons, for example, routinely imparted moral values. In Bugs Bunny's storyline, the rabbit is a character who minds his own business until someone else disrupts his routine. The morality of such characters can be summarized as, don't cause trouble for others unless they cause trouble for you. Many different cultures see this as a sound philosophy, making Bugs Bunny a relatable hero for a variety of audiences beyond what he originally intended. In the 1945 British novel Animal Farm, various political ideologies were personified as animals, such as the Stalinist Napoleon pig and the countless sheep, who unquestioningly followed his instructions. Although the storytelling style makes it seem like a children's fairy tale, this book was not a story for children, but for adults trying to understand the new political landscape during the Red Scare after the Second World War. Many modern books, movies, and video games can be considered animal tales. In cinema, there is a concept called talking animals in fiction. In this way, works have been created in which talking animal characters function as analogies to racial groups, both as a fable about social problems and as a fable about prejudices and stereotypes. One of the best examples of this is the Academy Award-winning movie Zootopia. Talking animals are a common element in mythology and folktales, children's literature, modern comics and cartoons. Fictional talking animals are usually anthropomorphic. That is, they have human qualities, like walking on two legs, dressing up, living in houses. Whether realistic animals or fantasy animals, talking animals serve a wide range of uses in literature, from teaching morality to providing social commentary. Realistic talking animals can often be found in fairy tales, religious texts, indigenous texts, wilderness stories, naturalistic fiction, animal autobiography, and animal satire. Conversely, fantastical and more anthropomorphic animals are often found in fairy tale, science fiction, Toy Story, and fantasy genres. The use of talking animals allows storytellers to combine the animal's basic traits with human behavior, apply metaphor, and entertain children as well as adults, and is used in fictional works in a variety of ways as a means to add social commentary. In addition, talking animals can be used satirically for humorous purposes and to decentralize and de-emphasize the human experience. Talking animals can also be used to create analogies or allegories. For example, in Narnia, Aslan can be seen as an allegory for Christ. The tradition of using talking animals in stories dates back to 550 BC, with the Greek Aesop's Fables. The Panchatantra, a collection of Indian animal tales, is another early example. Both use talking animals for didactic purposes. More recent tales, such as Sarah Trimmer's The Story of the Robins, use talking animals to teach children how to behave in society and how to maintain social order. They also reiterate the superiority of humans over animals, and that humans are therefore responsible for their care. The concept of the talking creature appears in most traditional literature and in various mythologies, including Greek, Chinese, and Indian mythologies. A notable example from the Judeo-Christian tradition is the talking serpent from the Book of Genesis, who tempted Eve to eat the forbidden fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In the Quran, animals are seen as a gift from God and created to serve humans. Except for a few animals that can speak, they are never anthropomorphized, personified, or given names. There are only a few instances in the Quran where animals speak, and most of these occur in relation to Solomon. For example, it is a ibib bird that tells King Solomon about the idolatrous ways of Queen Sheba. In Native American mythology, animals are integral to human survival, and thus considered part of the Native American family. The distinctions between humans and animals are more fluid. In these stories, animals represent the ability to adapt, to serve as mentors and guides. For example, in Louise Erdrich's Chickadee, the protagonist is rescued by a chickadee who teaches him to find food and water after escaping from a kidnapping. Stories of growing up in the wild also feature talking animals. In the Disney series The Jungle Book and Tarzan, Mowgli, along with Shanti and Ranjan, can talk to the animals in the jungles of India and to Tarzan. In the Sailor Moon series, the main character Usagi Tsukino and her friends awaken their powers as Sailor Guardians, thanks to the talking cats Luna and Artemis, who also serve as their mentors and advisors. Finally, in this digital age where modern childhood often has little contact and exposure to animals in the natural environment, naturalistic animal fictions allow authors to depict natural animal behavior. For example, both the 1928 novel and the Disney movie Bambi realistically depict the life cycle of deer. This type of fiction is called naturalistic animal fiction. And fictional works told from the point of view of an animal, such as The Horse in Black Beauty, are called animal autobiographies. This genre encourages readers to empathize with animals. They also challenge the human-animal divide more generally. Other examples of animal autobiography include The Life and Perambulations of a Mouse, The Biography of a Spaniel, The Adventures of a Donkey, The Curious Adventures of a Field Cricket, and Thy Servant a Dog. Now let's go back to the story of the scorpion and the frog I told at the beginning of the video. Although this story is attributed to Aesop, its origins go back a long way. Although its exact origin is unknown, it can be found in the texts and works of many cultures and civilizations. There is even a Persian tale called The Scorpion and the Tortoise, which is considered the predecessor of the story. What you see on the screen is an illustration of The Scorpion and the Tortoise from the 19th century edition of Anvaar Soheili, a collection of Persian fairy tales. Anvaar Soheili contains tales translated from the Panchatantra, a collection of Indian fairy tales written in Sanskrit. But The Scorpion and the Tortoise does not appear in the Panchatantra, so it is thought to be in Persian. The earliest known appearance of this tale is in Lev Nitoburg's 1933 Russian novel, The German Quarter. Later, the tale appears in its earliest known English version in the 1944 novel, The Hunter of the Pamirs. When the movie Mr. Arkadin, known as Confidential Report in England, was released in 1955, the story became famous, because it was the first time the story was used in a movie. Later, the story was told as an important element in many other movies such as Skin Deep in 1989, The Crying Game in 1992, and Drive in 2011. In addition, the tale has been referenced in comics, television programs, and newspaper articles, some of which have adapted it to the relationship between big business and government. The basic message of the story of the scorpion and the frog is that people with evil characters cannot refrain from committing evil acts, even to their own detriment. In short, a scorpion is a scorpion. The story does not explicitly state the morality it is trying to teach, and is therefore open to interpretation. But a common interpretation is that people with vicious personalities cannot resist harming others, even if it is not for their own benefit. There are elements in the story that are easy to empathize with. Take, for example, the naivety of the frog. The frog here represents the well-meaning person. In the face of a seemingly reasonable offer, he agrees to take the scorpion on his back as part of his nature, his goodwill. The scorpion, in turn, harms him as part of its own nature. After all, we have all made some decisions like the frog in this story, and then regretted this decision or show of goodwill, haven't we? When we do someone a favor, and then find out that the person is not worth it, or when we are betrayed by him, we fall into the frog's mistake. So what is the right thing to do here? Not to trust anyone in the first place? What lesson should other frogs learn from this frog's death? Not to trust any animal, or not to trust the scorpion? Before getting too attached or emotionally attached to someone, should we always try to understand what their nature is? We should look at who people really are, not who they present themselves to be at that moment. We can all use masks at certain times to make ourselves look better than we can be when necessary. We are all prone to giving in under pressure, feeling exhausted, losing our temper, and revealing a side of ourselves far worse than we usually are. These include, "I am so sorry. I'm not myself right now. I don't know what's happening to me. I'm not usually like that." But it often gives itself away. In the story, Frog makes the unfortunate and sad decision to trust Scorpio. A smile, a few endearing words, and a very temporary and very misleading representation of who he is, was enough for the frog to let his guard down and forget or ignore that he already knew what the scorpion was. But there is one thing that distinguishes this story from many similar stories, and that is that the scorpion is consciously acting to his own detriment. So while there are many animal tales that warn against trusting people with vicious characters, in none of these other tales are the villains self-destructive. The story of the scorpion and the frog is unique in that the scorpion irrationally self-destructs and is fully aware of it. From a Freudian point of view, the death drive means that we are all, on some level, self-sabotaging scorpions. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze, on the other hand, makes the scorpion the victim of a character construct. According to him, the scorpion's desire has become a fatal destiny due to an unfortunate combination of possible factors. The French sociologist Jean-Claude Passeron sees the scorpion as a metaphor. Machiavellian-like politicians who delude themselves with their unconscious tendency to rationalize their ill-conceived plans, thus leading themselves and their followers to ruin. Psychologist Kevin Dutton sees the scorpion as a metaphor for psychopaths. A metaphor for people whose impulsive and vicious personalities often get them into unnecessary trouble, often harming people they depend on, such as their own families. In Mr. Arkadin, the villain of the film, Arkadin uses the word character instead of nature when telling this tale and ends by saying, "Let's drink to character." For director Orson Welles, the word character had two meanings. It could mean one's natural instincts, but it could also mean how one chooses to behave. The scorpion could not resist his natural urge to sting, but he also chose to be honest with the frog about it. Orson Welles believed that this honesty gave the scorpion a certain charm and tragic dignity. Welles attributes a similar strength of character to Gregory Arkadin in his film. Although Arkadin is evil, he is also brave and passionate, and Welles admired this. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze has noted that Welles often took a nihilistic attitude towards the villains in his films. Even if Welles disliked them and wanted them destroyed, he refused to condemn them on just grounds. The scorpion is not an evil creature, he says, but a force that is unable to adapt to unusual circumstances and therefore renders itself impotent, if not self-destructive. Deleuze says this is the essence of Gregory Arkadin, the villain of Mr. Arkadin. In short, a scorpion is a scorpion. It is absurd to get really angry at a scorpion for behaving like a scorpion. It's in their nature. Instead, it is up to us to do a better job of controlling who we allow into our lives, who we spend our time and energy on. It is our job to pay more attention. We have to do our best to avoid traps, to avoid wasting time, to avoid getting hurt unnecessarily, and to start paying more attention. If we can do that, we won't say the famous cliché, "I always lose out of good intentions." Take care and see you in my next video. Goodbye.